Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the 3 best bass fishing lures that you need to have in your tackle box every time you go out fall fishing, because these baits will catch fish anywhere in the country under any conditions. So I picked these 3 baits strategically because they will catch all 3 species of bass under any conditions and in any place in the country. So make sure you stay tuned to the end of today's video and you'll be catching more fall bass in no time with these 3 baits alone. Starting with bait number 1, we're going to be talking about the jerkbait. This bait works in all bodies of water and it'll work for all 3 species of bass, and the theme of today's video is going to be to keep it simple for fall fishing. There is a ton of options out there, and while a lot of baits will work during the fall, if you keep it simple, stick to 3 confidence baits we're going to talk about today, and fish what you know works, you'll be catching a lot more fall bass than trying to get caught up on all the different types of baits that you can throw. So the jerkbait, why is it so effective for bass? It imitates dying shad or any type of bait fish very, very well. In the fall, when that water temps start to drop, you'll have bait fish that start to die off because they can't make it through the winter. They're not healthy enough or whatever it may be, and bass will eat them up as often as they can because they're trying to get full and fat enough to make it through winter, just like those bait fish aren't making it through winter. The nice part about a jerkbait is you can cover pretty much a ton of different depth ranges, and you can cover a bunch of different colors. So while there's a ton of baits out there on the market that you can pick from when you're picking a jerkbait, there's only a couple that you need, and we're going to talk about that right now. So I break jerkbaits down into 2 categories. Ones that glide and have a really slow motion, I call it, and ones that have a lot snappier motion to it and will dart a lot more and have a more erratic action to it. In the early fall, you're going to want to use a bait that has a lot more erratic action to it, and you'll know it has that by the body shape. So it'll be a lot fatter of a body. It won't have flat sides. It'll be more rounded. It'll also have a deeper body across it, like this, where it has the big deep body. Those baits will have that snappier action. They'll be more erratic. Baits that come to mind are the Lucky Craft Pointer and the Rapala X-Rap. Those are the typical ones that I like to fish as snappy jerkbaits. And then when you get into later fall, you're going to want to go to that slower motion jerkbait when the bait really starts to slow down. All of nature just starts to slow down and that water gets cold. You want to mimic that in your bait choice. That's when you're going to go to slower moving baits like the Megabass Vision 110 or the Rapala Shadow Wraps. Those are baits that come to mind when I talk about those. They will have a flat side to them, they will not have a rounded body, and they will be very slim. When you jerk the slimmer baits, they will almost glide instead of dart, and when you do that, that's you're gonna get more bites when that bait is moving very slow. When it comes to color choices, I keep it really, really simple. On sunny days, I like stuff that has a little bit of metallic in it, especially if the water is dirty or stained. While the metallic colored jerkbaits are kind of a catch-all to work in almost all water scenarios, on opposite ends of the spectrum, in the cleanest water, I like to use a jerkbait that's very translucent there and you can see right through it. That has the most natural look in a clear water scenario. And then if you're fishing stained water on the opposite end of the spectrum, that's when I'll go to a bone colored jerkbait. That's what will perform the best in that color of water. Just that solid white color or any other opaque color puts off the best flash in that dirtier water, and that'll give you the best chance of catching a fish on a jerkbait in dirty water. If you have perch in your lake, the one color that I really like to throw is actually the Rapala Shadow Wrap Deep in this metallic perch color here. This color right here is the best perch mimicking color I have found on the market. Megabass makes some good ones as well, but for some reason that little bit of shine and the natural colors and the lines on this bait just perform really well when you're fishing around fish that are eating perch. And lastly, if you have smallmouth in your lake, you want to have some form of chartreuse in your jerkbait, whether it's like a chartreuse line like that, or the belly of the bait is chartreuse like this one here. That little bit of yellow pop, it works in dirty water as well, but especially around smallmouth bass, the chartreuse really gets them fired up and you'll catch a lot more fish if you just have a touch of chartreuse in your jerkbait. My second choice for a bait for fall bass fishing, which is even more versatile than the jerkbait, is going to be a crankbait. There's so many options out there on the market, from colors, depths, sizes, everything. I'm gonna break it down for you really simple on your progression of crankbaits throughout the fall, because there is not one that will cover the entire fall, but you can keep it super simple with just a couple crankbaits. You do not need hundreds, and you can catch a ton of bass throughout the fall. Now, my first crankbait in the fall fishing rotation is going to be a deep crankbait, because very early fall when the fish are still offshore, they have not made their move shallow yet, or at least they're starting to move shallow. When they're offshore like that, you can still catch them on a crankbait, especially once that water starts to cool down. They'll start eating the crankbait again, even if those offshore fish stopped biting it. And I keep it very simple with my offshore crankbaits. Have your crankbait run a foot to 2 deeper than the depth of water you're fishing. So this one right here is a Spro DD, goes 12 foot deep. I would fish this in 10 foot of water. This one is a 5XD, and that goes 15 foot deep. I would fish that in 13 to 14 or maybe even 12 foot of water. So with these two crankbaits, I can cover 8 to 15-ish foot of water with just these two choices right here. And then as for colors, it is really simple. In the early fall like that, those fish are gonna be eating shad 100%. Like a parrot or a chartreuse color here, chartreuse blue back, whatever color you wanna call it, that is gonna be my choice for dirty water. And then in clear water, I'm gonna go to this guy right here with just a shad pattern. Now I'll start throwing the square bill crankbait once the fall turnover starts to happen, and what will happen is the colder water will now be shallower than the deeper water, and the fish will push back in the creeks to chase the bait fish that are going to the cooler water. That's when the square bill crankbait will come into handy. You'll be able to bounce it off the logs and sticks that these fish will be living on in the backs of these creeks or areas where they're starting to get shallow. And again, I keep it very simple on my colors: a chartreuse and a shad pattern. That's it. That's all you need. If your lake has bluegill and they don't have shad, get a bluegill crankbait, and that will work as well too. They'll start chasing bluegill that are up shallow. Now as the fall progresses, this is when I'm going to start to introduce two different types of crankbaits. A flat-sided crankbait, where it has those very narrow sides right down there, has a very tight wiggle. This is when the water's going to start getting a lot colder. And I will introduce a crawfish pattern as well, especially around smallmouth bass in the fall. They'll really start eating that, or spotted bass. Both of them love crawfish right before the fall, so the last chance that you get to fish this around some rocky banks, that's when I really like to do that. These are the last two crankbaits I mix in when those fish get really active before the water gets too cold. Is going to be either a Spro rock crawler or a wigglewort right there. They're pretty much the same bait. These will have a very wide body there, and those crankbaits will actually have a very wide wiggle to them as well. And you can see they come in a ton of different variety of crawfish colors. Everything from super wild like this one, this bright red color, all the way to this more natural brown crawfish color. This is just going to depend on your water clarity. If you have clean water, I go with the natural crawfish colors, the ghost crawfish colors, stuff like that. If you have dirty water, that's when I'm going to go to these red crawfish colors or these orange and chartreuse crawfish colors, stuff like that, that'll really stand out in that dirty water and get you a lot more bites. And my final bait for fall bass fishing, this is going to be if you're going fall bass fishing and you have no clue what to throw. You can't get on fish for some reason, can't catch them, they're biting tough, anything like that, or you just don't know where to start, tie on a jig. I'm going to break it down super simple on the only couple jigs that you need here, but if you tie on a jig and just go fish anything that looks good in the fall, you will catch fish. This is a 365-day bait. It works all year round, but especially in the fall, it mimics a big crawfish, a big bluegill, anything like that. These fish want to get a big meal before fall or before winter comes, and they will eat a jig very well in the fall. I use a 1/2 ounce jig, flipping jig, in green pumpkin color, and I'll use a black and blue. That's it. On clean water, I'll use the green pumpkin, and on dirty water, I'll use the black and blue. The only thing I change throughout the course of fall is my trailer, and as the water gets colder to where it's really cold, I will switch from a 1/2 ounce jig to a 3/8 ounce jig because it has a little bit slower fall, and as things start to move slower, you don't want that fast fall of that 1/2 ounce jig. For my trailer, I keep it really simple. I have trailers that have action, and I have trailers that don't have action. I'll start with the ones that have action in the early fall, and what I mean by that is like a rage tail craw where the claws actually move, or a zoom Z craw, the claws actually move on that. I will use those type of baits in the early fall. I pick like a rage bug or a Z-Cross, stuff like that, because it has a very wide profile on this bait. So it really mimics a bluegill or a crawfish really well. And then when it gets to the later fall, that's when I'll go to the Reaction Innovations Beaver. That's probably my favorite one for fall fishing. It doesn't have any action whatsoever. The claws do not move. They stay perfectly straight and flow through the water. And that will get you a lot of bites as that water cools down. Go to a 3/8 ounce jig with that Reaction Innovations Beaver on the back, and you'll get a lot of bites by having your bait fall a little bit slower when everything else in the water column is moving a lot slower as well. So I hope this video helped you simplify your fall bass fishing and only pick a couple lures that you need to go out there on the water with. These baits are the ones that I have tied on my deck every single time I go out because they are so effective to catch fall bass and they work under any condition. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like down below and let me know what other type of bait videos you'd like to see, whether you'd like to see one each month on what I'm throwing that month, or if you'd like to see each season. Leave that in the comments below, and thanks for watching.